Senator Rob Sampson of Wolcott joins us now. Hey there, Rob.
Hey there, Todd.
Nice to hear. We haven't talked in a couple of weeks, and I assume all kinds of bad stuff must have happened.
Yes, I apologize for the long absence, but this time of year I am tied up all day and all night trying to stop bad things from happening at the state capitol. And sadly, I'm not winning that battle. The Democrats are still up to their usual antics. They're growing government, spending money, undermining private contracts, trying to destroy the criminal justice system, you know.
And the part about spending money, that intrigues me in particular. Just I assume that despite the fact that they got a reprieve on bankrupting the state because of all the COVID money that came in, that they still aren't changing course. That's my impression. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. This state budget will be over $50 billion for the biennium. And just to give you an idea, when I was first elected in 2010, the state budget was around $15 billion for 1 year. So it's gone up dramatically in just, a little over a decade.
So it's gone from 15 to 25 billion a year.
That's correct. Yes, it's a little hard to do it apples to oranges because, of course, they have very cleverly reconfigured how to even count the money.
Yeah, so they put things in different columns now and hide things and stuff. Is that what you mean?
That's exactly correct. We've had a spending cap, not a constitutional spending cap, and not even one that they've really particularly abided by. But it's very clever. In order to get around the spending cap, what they typically do is they just take and move things. Oh, Senator Sampson, that's an off-budget expense. I'm like, so they use that as a mechanism to get around the spending cap. But the amount of spending continues to go up year after year. And if you look at any state budget in the out years, you can see that there's a deficit. So they're passing a budget knowing full well that maybe they can contrive some gimmicky methodology to make it balanced for the next 2 years, but they already know we're back in deficit in the third year. Mm-hmm. And they do it every time. It's amazing. No one would run their own business or their own household that way, but yet the state government continues to.
But one of the things with state government, they've always told us is, well, the federal government can print money, but we can't do that. We have to balance the budget every year. But in fact, they don't, because they build these financial time bombs into the budget that cause there to be commitments to spending money that doesn't exist.
Right. You have lots of ways to avoid paying now what you can pay later. I mean, they borrow money, increase our debt service. Mm-hmm. I don't know exactly where we fall on the list of states, but I guarantee you we're in the top handful of states with the most, the highest debt ratio. We certainly have the highest debt per person in the whole country. That means that Connecticut is the most indebted state. And that's because of the long-term obligations that continue to build up and the lack of desire on the part of the majority to pay them off. They have been better in recent years, and that's because they have had a lot of money gifted to them via the federal government. But it's not they should be much more responsible than they are.
What would people be most appalled by in terms of specific legislation if they knew more about what was going on?
Just the sheer volume of things that we spend taxpayer dollars on. It's hard to make a list. I can give you an example. I mean, just the other day, we had a vote in the Senate about expanding Medicaid, which is effectively welfare in the form of health care for people that are underprivileged, to include a mandate that it would include coverage for obesity. And that mandate not only covers bariatric surgery, which is an unbelievably expensive surgery. It can be like $30,000. But it also includes prescription drugs and even counseling, even maybe possibly lifetime counseling. And this is all happening at the expense of the taxpayers of Connecticut. What's funny, Todd, is that when we get a bill that's before us in the legislature, it's supposed to come with a fiscal note. The mm-hmm. Office of Fiscal Analysis is supposed to tell us, just how much it's going to cost. And this particular fiscal note simply just said significant because they couldn't put it. Yeah, they couldn't put a number on it. And, of course, the powers that be didn't want a number on it because
Right.
the bill would never have passed. It may be $1 billion in additional spending in the state. Of course, not in the budget. They're going to have to find that money even after the budget's passed.
By the way, Connecticut is sixth in the country as of 2020 for debt, state and local government debt in the U.S. as a percentage of gross domestic product. So that's the number you were looking for, right?
Right. Well, and first in the actual dollar amount per person.
Yes, per person, yes. Per capita debt, it's the worst place to carry around the tax burden. So this is what picture you're painting, which I think is accurate, but hard perhaps for the average person to understand and accept, or at least as a new idea, is that really if government has the power, that is, if one side is dominant enough, they will just run roughshod over any principle that having to do with good government or decency or fairness to taxpayers. They just do whatever they want. And even respect for founding documents and constitutions and things like that. They don't care, right?
No, not in the least. And I'm afraid, there are very few people in the legislature in either party that actually care. Mm-hmm. And that's my number one frustration, is that I'm constantly battling with my colleagues in the Republican Party, trying to pull them back to any sense of American principles and values. We're constantly debating whether or not the government should be interfering in private contracts, because certainly the Democrats do it in almost every arena and every industry. And my Republican colleagues will certainly call them to task on it in a lot of cases. But in other cases, the same thing might be happening in a different industry, and they find excuses to support it. Even our state budget offerings. And I certainly don't want to trash my colleagues, and I want to state for the record that the Senate Republicans are offering the most responsible budget alternative of the four caucuses and the governor, but it needs to go a lot further. The fact of the matter, Todd, is that we are being saved. Inflation is actually the only mechanism that the state has to fix its finances, because it's the only thing that erases the mountains of debt that actually exist. And the fact of the matter is they're not using that tremendous opportunity to right the ship. They are just continuing to spend the money that's before them and make an even, a greater pile of debt for the future.
So explain to people how that works, that dynamic of inflation being the escape route for government to get out from under the weight of its overspending.
Right. Well, inflation is a terrible, terrible thing because it steals wealth. For example, if you have money in your bank account and maybe that money is enough to buy a car today, you can wait into the future, and as the value of the dollar declines, that amount of money will no longer buy a car. So you're losing value. And sometimes the government purposely creates inflation as a mechanism to erase debt. That ends up erasing debt in the private sector, which is unfortunate for people that are owed money. But they ought to use it to their advantage if they're going to do that, to erase their debt. Mm-hmm. But they don't. They just keep borrowing more.
Yes. It's really scary. And I wonder what we can do if there's some mechanism other than having to get people to wake up to reality and start voting better. But I don't know how that can happen. What gives you hope, Rob Sampson?
The only hope I really have is that there are other states across this country that are making different choices than Connecticut. And when they make better choices and it becomes clear that the residents of the United States of America are going to begin picking and choosing where to live based on the way their state governments operate.
And that's happening now, right?
Yeah, I think we're seeing, the beginning of that. But I think that's a situation that's going to grow progressively more common, and you're going to start seeing real differences between red and blue states. And I think when that happens, I think the blue states are going to be forced to have to come back to, a reasonable set of, policies to compete. So that's about the only thing that's giving me hope right now. I'm completely devastated day after day that I go to the state capitol. Almost no good bills are happening. Mm-hmm. It's just one terrible thing after another. Another anti-business regulation, another, mountain of spending, more mandates. The other day there was a vote to effectively take away the last few remaining cost containment measures that insurance companies have when they negotiate with hospitals and doctors. And I know nobody likes insurance companies, and we want doctors to be able to make choices with the patient and stuff like that. And I am completely behind that. But at the same time, you've got to recognize that the more you do that, the more the premiums are going to go up. And the very same people that are the first ones at the head of the line to go and scream at the insurance companies when we have the yearly public hearing about the double-digit rate increases, well, those are the same people passing these laws that are undermining the ability of the insurance companies to contain their rates. So it's very frustrating.
So what you're saying is it's a rigged system in which the insurance company is just like the legislature on this, and that is that they figure that everybody's making more money. We can make everything bigger. The legislature says we can benefit by promising things in health care to people for which there is no money to pay for. And the insurance companies say, well, if they want to pass mandates, we just pass the cost along, so it's no skin off our back. But it's government-directed expansion and explosion of cost.
That's right. The government is responsible for all of it. They create perverse incentives in the marketplace, and you can't blame the folks for acting upon it. Insurance companies now are so heavily regulated that they don't compete with one another on the notion that they can do a better job of, writing a policy or managing their claims experience or any of that. That's not how they do it anymore, because the government requires that all those policies match each other. All of their methodology for how they handle transactions is all the same. So there's no real difference when you go from insurance company to insurance company. So they become
like utilities, health insurance companies.
They are a delivery mechanism, and that's that. And what the perverse incentive is in this case, Todd, is the fact that in order for insurance companies to make more money, because they're even regulated to the amount of profit they can make, the only thing that allows them to make more money is not to run a better company and find more profit and better management. It is they actually have to raise premiums because they're only allowed, say, 10 or 15% to take off the top to run the company with.
So the premiums are dictated by the government regulation then?
That's correct.
And therefore, when they're pointing fingers and blaming insurance companies, they're pointing at the mirror.
Absolutely. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and there's different types of motivations. Folks on the left, they are desperate for a single-payer system. So like everything else they're doing, they want to break the healthcare industry. They want to break the mechanism by which we operate with the healthcare and insurance. And it is broken. Don't get me wrong. I don't agree with the current system the way it operates. But they're trying to make it worse because they want people to be able to point and say, look, our healthcare system is a disaster. We need to do something. It's the only way to fix it is to go to the government and have a single payer system. It also allows people on the left to point a finger at capitalism. That's my greatest frustration more than anything.
It doesn't work.
Yeah. They are constantly trying to say that capitalism doesn't work, and they point to things that are not capitalism. It's unbelievable. Every time they put a new government mandate on or restriction in a private contract, I'm reminding them you're taking away what is the free exchange of goods and services by willing participants and replacing it with government control. That's not capitalism. And the end result is a bad economy. And the more places, and the more we have the places where you have the most government intervention is where you have the worst economies. And therefore, I'm trying to make the case that, let's go back in the other direction. Let's allow freedom and markets to work.
Talking to State Senator Rob Sampson. We just have a minute left, Rob. Any good news you want to share or anything that's making you happy these days?
The happiness comes on June 7th at midnight when the legislature is no longer in session and they cannot be doing any more damage. And I don't want to give people the impression that we don't do anything good, because there's a great many bills that go through the legislature that are not necessarily harmful and that we do pass on a bipartisan basis.
You mean like this making a pepperoni pizza the official pizza of the state or something like that?
Yeah, sometimes that's the most you can hope for. I had the great fortune of being able to get a resolution passed the other day recognizing folks who served in the Vietnam era that were exposed to Agent Orange, and that was a tremendous honor for me, and I was able to speak on the floor of the Senate and thank our veterans. So to me, that was a positive day.
Yeah.
But sadly, we went right back to passing more mandates and anti-business regulation right afterwards.
Rob Sampson, depressing and great to talk with you.
Can't wait for the next time.
All right. Where do people find you online?
You can find me at senatorsampson.com. And, of course, I'm on Facebook, on Instagram, and all those places, too.
State Senator Rob Sampson Wolcott, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Todd. Take it easy.
Talk to you.